let me put the question to you. We are talking about the fear of missing out. Why at all are we talking about the fear of missing out, and why is this session at all needed? You know, I think 15 years back in business schools, there was no fear of missing out session. I think in SPJMR, the history of this session is that when I was in SPJMR, somebody came to me and said, hey, we need to do a session on the fear of missing out. I said, great, do it. I said, this is what is needed. So then I, just out of curiosity, I said, who's doing it? So they looked me in the eye and said, you are. So that was kind of history of it. And that session became something of a hate. So when we came here, I said, look, I used to do this. Why don't we do this? So we're doing it. That's kind of where it is. Why are we talking about the fear of missing out? What is it? And why is it an issue at all? Yes.
This is something I can say from my personal experience. As someone who does not know much about B-School, we want to grab onto as many opportunities as we can. Even without having any clue about what a thing is, we want to participate just because we don't want to miss out on that opportunity. Even when we don't have the caliber, even when we are not able to facilitate in our curriculum, in our timetable, we still want to do it, and if we don't, then we feel bad about it.
So we want to grab every opportunity, even when we do not have the caliber. The other issue is I don't know what I'm good at, right? Yes. So I don't always know what I can do or what I cannot do. So then that desire to try is fairly honest. Okay. Keep going. Yeah?
I think most of us are actually vulnerable to these kind of fear of because we feel if we are not a part of it, then I think we are losing something substantial, some kind of experience or skills.
Okay, so you use the word, there is a word in that acronym, right? Do you think this is a B school thing or it started much before B school? Yeah. Yeah.
So probably because Gen Z, which is coming into the foray now, has grown with digital devices and is considered one of the most insecure generations ever to exist.
Okay.
Not with millennials, but more so with Gen Z coming in. So that could lead to FOMO being one of the most.
What's leading to this insecurity? What's the cause?
We can see everybody else doing something and we are like, "Ki, I also want to do it." So that's why we are feeling insecure. We are not getting to do it.
Constant comparison. Yes.
Okay, so when I grew up, there would be this occasion once in 2 weeks or maybe once in a month where the family would go to a neighbor's house for dinner. And this is the proverbial time when the comparison would come, which was the Sharma ji ka beta comparison. It is like whose kid is in which school and what are they doing and what marks did they get and what marks did you get. So the frequency of comparison there was much lower. We are talking about once in 2 weeks, once in a month. What is the frequency of comparison today?
Every hour.
Okay. So we are talking about frequency of social comparison, which is practically every minute. And there is something worse. If you look at Facebook or Instagram, everybody seems to be taking photographs under the Eiffel Tower, etc. Right? But there are much less fancy places which also have population where life is still going on. None of that gets reported. So we are all putting this very ideal best self out there. So the lives you are seeing on social media are not the real lives. The achievements you are seeing on social media are not the real picture. But who's going to filter that when you're seeing it, right? And therefore, every time when you see it, what seems to happen is everybody's life is better. But why should you care? Why should it bother you that somebody else is doing better? Apparently. Apparently better, right? We know it's apparently better. Why should it bother you?
So because I think it's our intrinsic nature to sort of want to live the best life, want to be our best selves. So the comparison automatically seeps in.
Why does your best self require comparison?
Because we're competitive.
Yes, I think I have a very different take on this whole idea of fear of missing out.
Hmm.
Personally, I don't have any fear of missing out. I'll tell you there's a reason for it.
Hmm.
And I'll give it an answer as to why I take this differently. The reason is that I'm someone who's spiritual.
Hmm.
So I believe in the idea of destiny and fate, and I also believe
Hmm.
that the path that we forge,
Hmm.
it's also decided by how we feel about ourselves.
Hmm.
The question that we ask is when we look at ourselves in the mirror, what do we see?
Hmm.
So personally, I don't see insecurity because at the end of the day, someone's going to be good at something regardless.
Hmm.
Then again, we also have that mind. Secondly, I believe the commercialization that has taken place. For instance, everything we do is commercialized. Look for clothes that's commercialized. Look for people that's commercialized, which is the worst thing. And other things as well, if you're taking examples. Considering those cases and considering the fact that she mentions that fear is something that is being made intrinsic, which should not be in the first place.
Okay.
It is something that does not.
Okay, understood. See, the argument about whether the fear is intrinsic or not is an interesting one. Because if you have Darwin and survival of the fittest and you buy into Darwin, then to a certain extent competitiveness is nature and not nurture. Yeah, there is a flip side to that. Have you read, anyone read Yuval Noah Harari? Okay, so what does Harari say? What sets the human being apart from the animal? Two things. Two things. So one is the cognitive ability. Therefore, the ability to collaborate in scale is what separates collaborate at scale, which is what organizations do, etc., etc. Collaborate at scale is one of the things that sets human beings apart from the animal race. What is the other? It's not related to this session. Okay, the other is a little, some people will not like it, it's a little sacrilegious and maybe even blasphemous in the way the content, but Harari's come to India and talked about it and nobody had an issue. I completely agree with what he's saying. He says the ability to create, believe and live our lives according to large scale fictions. And two of these large scale fictions and man-made large scale fictions, and two of the large scale fictions he mentions are country and religion. That these are man-made, they're the cause of most of the conflict that we have, but our ability to believe in these fictions is often a source of many of the good things that we do. So he's not necessarily saying that they're all bad, but he's saying that they are fictions. I mean, we have created these constructs, they're man-made, nobody will disagree with that. They're man-made and over a period of time we have believed in them, and that's kind of, okay. So I just want to put one point in front of you, that this comparison, some degree of competitiveness may be nature, but I am with you. It is society that has created this larger notion what does a zero sum game mean? Yeah?
One person gets something, other person won't get it.
Right. So just look at life. If you look at life, the majority of the situations that you face are not zero sum games. If you are in a team, you actually do better if the other members of the team are doing well. The majority of the situations you face are collaborative, competitive, some element of competition and some element of collaboration, but collaboration is the larger filter, is the larger frequency. But the zero sum game has got internalized. When I logically tell you that it's not true, that's okay. But at a deep day to day level, we behave with the assumption of a zero sum game. Why do you think that is so? Why do you think that is so? Why do you think that the zero sum game has become deeply internalized? Yeah?
So maybe because we've grown up in an environment where if you're not the best, we're not even good enough. We're always compared to one of the best, and if we don't achieve that, our worth is kind of validated by others' responses.
So I think yes, one of the best. So the best is defined. The best is defined relatively. You know, the story that I tell many times is just a simple thing of you come home with a mark and you are proud of that mark. The question is still what was the highest. The danger of that is if you're the first in your mediocre pool, you can be mediocre and happy. Right? So there was a question somebody asked me when I was leaving a job. And he said, do you want to be first among equals? Or do you want to be the one-eyed man in the country of the king? And you will never know if you're the one-eyed man in the country of the king, if relative is the only filter that you have. But largely this is what happens, right? So we compare, and therefore somebody doing well means I'm losing out. Although it is not so. And we often argue, resent, rebel with our parents. But I am grateful to my dad for this one thing. And I heard this statement so many times as a kid that it almost angered me till the point where I internalized it. And I heard this statement as a kid growing up like 3 times a year. The highest form of competition is competition with the self. At the end of the day, the only thing you can change is yourself. So your life's journey is a journey to discover and work towards your potential to contribute. That's it. That is within your control. So then, what is the utility of comparison? The only utility of comparison is competition and learning. It's not competition, it's benchmarking and learning. Okay, there are situations which are purely competitive, but a purely competitive mindset doesn't help anybody. Famous story from my engineering days, I don't know Satyajit whether it ever happened with you, but we had a batch topper. There used to be a book called G.B. Thomas Calculus. Anybody remember? You will have a standard calculus textbook in first year engineering, right? So there were 10 copies of that book in the library. This gentleman borrowed one and took the 8 other copies and kept them in a different section of the library. Okay. So this is the kind of thing that competition builds. Okay. So now let me stop this part here and go back to history. Okay. Anybody know how the term FOMO first originated? How and where? Anyone?
Stock market.
Okay, stock market is a good guess. Fear of missing out, stocks, etc. So it's a logical guess. It's wrong, but it's a logical guess. So this is factual. Harvard Business School had this social journal called Harbus. And the term first appeared in Harvard Business School's social magazine called Harbus. And the idea was that you had all these young people who landed up at the school, and then there were these opportunities, and these opportunities were typically social engagements, parties. And therefore, you looked at the social engagements that were coming up and you decided to commit, and you didn't know which party was better than the other. So basically, you signed up for everything because you had a fear of missing out. This piece was a satirical piece. And therefore, there were 3 terms in this piece. So first you sign up for parties because you have a fear of missing out. Now after you sign up for a party, some other event comes back on the same day. Now you say, oh no, I missed that chance because I have signed up for this. So along with FOMO, there is a second fear of FOBO, which is the fear of better options. Now, once you have a fear of missing out and a fear of better options, the combination is paralytic. So it talked about the third FO, FODA, which is the fear of doing anything. So this is how the whole thing started. But I'm going to bring this back, perhaps to my own journey, and then to a construct that I learned somewhere along my own journey. I think I learned the construct after I had gone through the journey, so I think that helps a little bit. So all of you have experienced this, that up to a point in your life, you are a topper. Not only are you a topper, but it comes easily. Right? So it comes easily. You just kind of did what you had to do and it happened, and you know, you were one of the best, and it was nice. It is a very nice feeling of self-belief. There is a second feeling. If you have not had it already, you will have it sometime in the next 2 months or sometime in the next 2 years. And actually, I can think of a few people who may not have it all the way up to MBA, but typically it starts with undergrad. Undergrad is the first level. So there will be a time where you're sitting in a class and you're listening, and 20 minutes into the class, there is this new and unfamiliar feeling and realization that hits you, which is, I don't get it. You don't understand. And it's the first time in your life that you don't get it. So what do? The first question you ask yourself is, am I the only one? So you look around. As you look around, everybody seems to be nodding sagely. There are even these people in the class who are asking the higher level questions. And at that point in time, you have a choice. You have a choice. One choice is to say, I don't get it. I need to try harder. And you work harder and you try to go through the fundamentals. And that's a very nice ideal thing. In general, that doesn't happen. I can speak about myself. The first time this happened was 12th standard. You walk into engineering. So I'm walking into an IIT class. And I don't know which class it was one of the classes, subjects which I thought I was very good. 20 minutes in, you don't get it. And you have two choices at that point in time. One choice is the first one. The second choice, I have a term for it, it's called acting cool. And acting cool basically comes in two varieties. But one clear variety is that if I appear not to try, I can kind of still coast academically. I don't have to top. But at least I will look cool, and at least I will say I haven't tried. Right? And I think that's what I did. I got into cult. I got into debating. I found a bunch of things. And a lot of those things honestly served me well in later life. But the point is, I don't think I did justice to the potential I had to learn science or to learn engineering or to learn those subjects in engineering. I mean, I had a lot, I had a blast, don't get me wrong. But it remains, and it remains as a regret. Much more importantly, there is a hollowness because you know you're superficial in some things. And that hollowness stays. So the first part of insecurity, the first element of FOMO really comes because at some point in time, you're so bothered about what other people think. Because all it took in that class, in that situation, was to put a hand up and say, I don't get it. And if you had put up a hand up and said, I don't get it, there would be 50 other people in the room who would be rooting for you. Because they also don't get it. Okay? So this is like my first point. And the second is I'll take my journey through and say, look, most of us when we make mistakes of this sort, we recover, by the way. We've gone to good institutions, we do enough. I mean, we know enough to give exams and get the next thing and kind of move on. Life rarely gives you second chances. I got a second chance. So I was 38, 39 when I started my PhD, by the way. It doesn't mention that I was running a consulting company. I handed over my consulting company to somebody else to run. So when I went for my PhD, we lived off the stipend of a doctoral student with a family of 4 for 4 years in the US. So I started my PhD at 39. I was 39. The next oldest person in the class was 26. Through the bulk of my career, I had prided myself on being the youngest in the class. And you know, so you talk about things and basically life catches up with you. So, but that's not the story. The story is that going into my PhD, I had done math in IMC and I was good at math, but that was at the age of 23. For 15 years, I had not had any interaction with a serious equation, right? And at 39, they put you into an advanced econometric class. There are Russians, there are Germans, there are all of these guys in the class. And I think some of it was my own thing also, that they said, you know, you've been away, do you want to take a basic stats course? And I said, no, I'm IMC, I did the tutorials and all, I'm going to straight go into the advanced econometrics class. So here I am sitting in an econometrics class, first day, first show. And he says, the inverse of the Hessian is positive semi-definite. And everybody nods like it's the most normal thing on the planet. And for me at that point in time, inverse was an English word. Hessian was a rope. Definite was an English word. But to put all of these together into one sentence, you know, one could not make sense of it. By the way, does anybody know what it means? So it means that the matrix of second derivatives is always positive. So that if you had to evaluate, if you had to take a determinant of the matrix of second derivatives, it's always positive. I had no clue. But there was a difference. The difference was I ran a company already for 10 years. I had given that up. My family had displaced. A whole bunch of people had a lot riding because I had taken this call. And I was there to learn. I no longer gave a damn. So every class you had this 39-year-old who would put up his hand and say, I don't understand. And you know what happens, right? After 3 or 4 sessions, the instructor says, you're kind of holding up the class, so, you know, let me continue. But there was one difference, as I said, I no longer cared. I would go back to that original paper. So if it was type 1 and type 2 and they were using it casually, I would go back to the first paper where type 1 and type 2 came. And I would read that. And maybe it would not sink in the first time. I would read it twice, I would read it thrice. Because I just wanted to learn. I said, to hell with where I finish, I want to learn. I've come here to learn, right? I can always go back and run a consulting company. But I've stayed here, I'm going to learn. And at the end of 2 months, that entire class was coming to me because I understood it fundamentally. Because I had taken the trouble to understand it fundamentally. I also realized that many of the people asking the high funda questions are pretending. Okay, but I took away something larger. And I think that is something that I would give to you as my first statement, which is there's nothing as cool as having the courage to be the guy in the room guy or girl in the room who puts up the hand and says, I don't get it. You're speaking for another 30 people when you do that. And much more important, you're demonstrating an attitude to learning. Because what happens is all these subjects, and you're looking at a block, right? Subjects are cumulative, it just builds up. If you lose the class in session 2, I'm guaranteeing you will have lost the plot by session 5. So you want to be the person who does not let lack of, and fundamentally you want to have understanding as an approach to life. Because when you don't have understanding as an approach to life, you're insecure. And to me, one of the bigger ways I look at this is if you look at secure people, they don't use jargon. Jargon is used by people who know they don't have much to say and are therefore trying to make it more complicated than it is. You know, one of the things I like to talk about, and I hope that doesn't happen to you, you know, at the end of the MBA, today you have common sense. You have a certain modicum of common sense. Not everybody have it, common sense is uncommon. But the point is, do not lose the ability to communicate simply just because you are acquiring a new vocabulary. As an example, after the MBA, if somebody asks you, what did Nirma do? People will say Nirma looked at the market and the value propositions in the market. They segmented the market based on price. They used the rapid penetration strategy and garnered a large market share. Before the MBA, you would say Nirma sold cheap. And it's the same thing. So the point is, never lose the ability to have the second form of communication. The first form of communication may have a function, but largely that first form of communication, if you're speaking to 2 people who speak the same language, it's okay. If you're not speaking to 2 people who speak the same language, then not only is it showing off, it's very bad communication. Because the message is not getting understood. So it's kind of leading you in the wrong direction. Okay. Let me take this one step further, and this was my own intuitive understanding. It did not fall into place till I read about the work of this lady called Carol Dweck. And Carol Dweck talked about the growth mindset. I would go one step further and this is an original quote, so you know, there is no such thing as success or failure. Success and failure are labels which society assigns to outcomes. In the ultimate analysis, there is only feedback. Every outcome is a form of feedback, and if you are able to do this, if you are able to take responsibility, then that is it. So, these are 3 or 4 things we are saying. One is that it is not talent that makes you succeed, and you all have a modicum of ability, otherwise you wouldn't be in this room. It is what you do with your ability. And ability is a muscle, it grows through challenge, it grows through stretch, it grows through reflection, it goes through putting yourself in situations where you might fail. Because without failure, there is no growth. Without challenge, there is no growth. Let me stop here and take questions. Yeah.
So this is not essentially a question, but just a continuation of what you said. So you mentioned ability versus effort, right? I was reading a bit about some parenting styles. And it said that if you compliment a kid or you give him some positive reinforcement on when he gets a good marks, and you say that you did like good work or you worked hard. So you give them positive reinforcement for their effort instead of their ability, then they will turn out to be more hardworking rather than just feel that they're the smartest person in the room.
So very, very clearly, this has implications for the way we give feedback. And it suggests that most of our parenting is wrong, and I think this is getting worse with the generations. Because when do you praise outcomes? You praise outcomes when you're spending less time with the kid. So as families become more nuclear and people are spending more and more time on screens rather than with each other, then you don't know enough to assess effort. So you go by outcomes, you decode talent based on outcomes, and I'm sure everybody in this room has faced this, that at some point in your life, if I ask you, for instance, I can do 3 things. Are you good at drawing? Okay, how many people here think you are good at drawing? Okay. How many people here think you are not good at drawing? Okay. How do you know you're not good at drawing?
We've attempted it.
Okay. Yeah. So we've attempted it, and somebody has told you you're bad at it, or your eyes told you you were bad at it. Okay, but the larger point I think is this, and I think that is one of the bigger things that my whole PhD thing taught me. You can become reasonably good at anything. On the drawing thing, I will prove it to you. You can't become the Tendulkar of everything. So there is something where talent and effort multiply, but you can become reasonably good at anything. The question is how hard you try. So that's to my mind. Similar one is math. By this time, in your mind, you're either good at math or not good at math, and it's a myth. Society has given you a judgment, and you have internalized that judgment. So there are large parts of our life where we are scarred. Some of those scars we are not even aware of, because somebody gave a judgment and we internalized that judgment. Now you combine that judgment with a zero-sum game and comparison, and is it a wonder that we are insecure? So I go back, highest form of competition is competition with the self. Just to tell you that I am not making this up, perhaps we'll show some slides. Okay. Yeah, questions? Huh?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, like you talked about the process is more important than the outcome, right? Like when you don't know about the process, you judge by the outcomes. So I wanted to ask, like practically in life, everybody does that. Like in corporates also, it's the outcome of the whatever you're doing matters rather than the process that goes behind it. So like how do you change that, or why do we still talk about this process? How do you change this mindset?
Okay. So here is the first thing. The process is more important than the outcome, people will say, but you say, hell, the outcome matters to me, right? So then what do I do? The question is this: do you control the outcome? On most of the things that matter to you, forget that. You know, I went through an experience in COVID where I lost my younger sister to COVID. And the one thing that taught me is that in life we hardly control anything. You know, you cannot keep your youngest and nearest ones alive. So, where is this issue of control? So, control is an illusion. You control effort, you control process. You do not focus on the process because you do not care about outcomes. You focus on the process because process increases the likelihood of outcomes. We want outcomes, but we only control the process. So, by focusing on the process, you are increasing the likelihood. Success or failure is not guaranteed. What you are trying to do is set yourself up for success. How do you set yourself up for success? By controlling controllables. The controllables are your potential, how much of it you discover, how much of it you utilize, your effort and the means in which you apply that effort. MS Dhoni, if you mute the audio and listen to a Dhoni interview, after he's won the World Cup and after he's lost the match, you will not be able to make out the change in body language. His body language rarely reveals his reaction to the outcome, he's all process. He has the highest success ratio of anybody. So, we control outcomes through controlling the process. That's the larger piece. Otherwise, what we will do is if you are insecure and you want an outcome, you will hack it. You will say, what are the shortcuts? That's why copying happens. That's why cheating happens. Because outcomes matter to us and we think that left to ourselves we will not get it. And then this whole thing kind of builds on itself. I'll take more questions.
Sir,
Yeah.
this is just for my understanding, I'm really sorry.
Huh.
Okay, you mentioned two particular things. You said that anybody can be reasonably good at anything.
Hmm. Hmm.
But the way I see it, to be reasonably good, to be able to appreciate art is, for instance, if I want to draw a circle, I see what a circle is and I'm trying to use my body in that way that I can make the circle.
Hmm.
If my body doesn't function that way, like if my hand movement is not like that, then doesn't that mean that it's something, it's a talent that you don't have or it doesn't exist in you per se? Like when you said the reasonably good part.
So,
Secondly,
yeah, so I'll come back. Yeah, finish your question.
so secondly, even in mathematics,
Hmm.
say for mathematics, you need to have a very basic understanding of the concepts, right? Concept is something I agree you said, it's acquired, you can learn it, you can do it.
Hmm.
But then again, if the base that's there, like we have left and right sides of the brain, right, is creative, it is more analytical person.
Hmm.
If the firing or functioning is not entirely up to that mark, so doesn't this mean that even though we may say that we can be reasonably good, it would never be that level because we can't function that way?
So, this is a deeper argument, it's a nature versus nurture argument, but let me take your second question first and then let me come. By the way, I'm giving away the surprise, but by the end of this class I will prove to you that everybody can draw. Okay, but before I go further, let me put this. How many of you think you're creative? Okay, so we have a really bright class. They're out of around 25, so that's 30%. NASA did a study. I want to ask you another question. Think back to a 6-year-old child you know. Okay, picture that 6-year-old child. How many of you know a 6-year-old child who's not creative? You do? I will not get into the details, but yeah. But the NASA figure when they did the study was 98%. 98% of 6-year-olds are divergent thinking geniuses. Okay. What does divergent thinking genius mean? I mean, a simplistic example would be to say that if I gave you a cup and said, apart from drinking water, you know, tell me 10 other things you can do with this cup. I mean, you can use it as a telephone, etc., 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 right? So, the small kid comes up with it very quickly because they have fewer filters, right? So, they come up with it quickly. This is a longitudinal study. So, they track these students till the age of 25. What do you think the percentage is at the age of 25?
Very less.
Very low.
2%. So, you are like well above the global average at 30. Okay, but largely the point there is twofold. One is it is society that socializes the creativity out of you. Secondly, we are born whole-brained. It is that our education system exercises a part of our brain and does not exercise the other part. So, left and right everybody has. So, that's the first thing. The second is that There are so many examples. I mean, classic Polgar. There's this parent called Polgar, and he had 3 daughters, all of whom became chess grandmasters. And you'll read about it in Matthew Syed and even. And basically, this guy said, I will have 3 grandmaster children. I mean, he was a chess player, so you would argue that there was some nature, but all 3 became grandmasters. And it was just that they were trained from the age of 4. And that was kind of their conditioning, and that was kind of their training. But I would argue that what happens is that because of this myth of talent, we are trying to find out what we are good at and what we are not good at. And it's almost a Yash Chopra-esque story, in the sense that someone somewhere is made for me, or you know that there is some talent, that I have, that when I have it, everything will fall into place because life will be so easy, and there is no such talent. Okay, there is no such talent. I'm a moderately good public speaker by most. The first time I stood up to speak was in a school debate. I got up, saw the audience, froze completely, sat down. Okay, what is my point? If at that point in time somebody had told me, you are terrible, give up on public speaking, and I had internalized that, that was the end. I would never have discovered it. So I think when you have this ability myth, even 1 or 2 incidences will put you off something for the rest of your life, and you will never discover. How many of you played a guitar? Okay, so my kids, when they started to play the guitar the first time your fingers hurt, right? And it's not natural. So they took guitar classes, and they stopped after a month or 2. Okay? 3 years later, miraculously on their own, they went on YouTube, learned for themselves, and today they're playing with, they're trying to play Sultans of Swing. I mean, for those who know, then that's a high bar, right? I mean, if you can sit at home and practice Sultans of Swing, that's a high bar. But my point is again that the fixed mindset is a problem. The fixed mindset does not help us to learn. Is there an element of ability? Yes, there is. The problem with that assumption is we give up too many things too quickly. So have I answered your question? Yeah? You wanted to point?
As a student of this class, I hope you don't mind asking. The way I see FOMO so far in this session, it seems to be something which is debilitating, right? Stopping you from performing to your potential. Is that the way you see it?
Not always. No. So insecurity can drive effort in some cases. So competition or the fear of missing out is not always an issue. Sometimes comparison can be positive. But to me, the only positive function of comparison is benchmarking. If you are not using it to benchmark your ability and do something, but at a larger level, what it leads to is a series of things. I compare. So let me give you an example. I don't know what I'm good at, not good at. That's the first thing. Self-awareness is an issue. I come into a campus, I want outcomes. I see these 10 different things. I sign up for everything. Because I sign up for everything, 2 or 3 things can happen. I can do the first 3 things I sign up for were not things I was sure of. I do badly. It says everybody else is good. It puts me off. It affects my confidence for the others. Even worse, I sign up for everything. I don't give full attention to everything. I get lower outcomes. Then I say, what's the answer? I haven't got any outcomes in this 5. Let me sign up for more. People are badly burnt out. And the incidence of mental health problems is on the rise. That's the negative story. There's a positive story. The positive story is I use competition as a force, but even in my positive story, you need to be able to control FOMO. And it starts by saying, being comfortable with who you are. And then working on who you are and accepting that you are work in progress. So that combination would be my answer. I don't know again whether I've answered your question fully. Yeah.
So can we say comparison is okay, but you need to draw a boundary of where to compare, when to compare, and where to stop?
One, Second, I will say comparison does not guarantee excellence. It's the Amir Khan 3 Idiots thing, काबिलियत के पीछे भागो. So chase excellence for its own sake. So the point is, if you are first and you are getting the job you want, do you stop improving?
No, definitely not.
Because so the thing is that if you look at life as a journey to discover your excellence and your contribution, and you never get there. So in 2010, I wrote a personal vision statement. I said, I want to be the best teacher I can possibly be, and I want to be a teacher of teachers. Some would say I've achieved a part of the second one. But remember the ones I've written, no? You never get there. You will never be the best teacher you can possibly be. Because if you think you have become the best teacher you can possibly be, then there's no, you might as well die next day, right? So the point is, it's the journey that is important. And if you focus on the process and the journey, then no single outcome is going to push you all the way down or all the way up. Because let's say the guy who says he wants to become a CEO at 40, चल बन गया, उसके बाद क्या करेगा? And one of the things I say, and this is for your class, it doesn't matter when you become CEO. What matters is what you do after you become CEO, because that's your contribution. Up to that, CEO is just a position. You know that there is this lovely Simon Sinek story where he says that the first year I go to this conference, I'm a minister, I get received by people at the airport, and I go over and I talk, and they take me to a green room, they give me coffee in a china cup, then I'm sipping my coffee in a china cup and I'm speaking. The next year I'm no longer a minister, I'm speaking on the same topic at the same conference. Audiences change. He said, I land up at the airport, I take an Uber. I ask for coffee, there's a coffee machine udhar hai. I go and I take my coffee in a plastic cup. And then he says, I'm speaking to the same audience. I'm the same guy. But this year there is China, there is a plastic cup. Last year there was the China. My true worth is that plastic cup. The rest is the position. So, very good question as a leader to ask yourself. If you didn't have the position, would people still follow you? What will you do better if you are focused on the outcome that you would not do if you were focused on the process? Beyond worrying about what the other people are doing. Process does not say that you don't improve. Process says you have hunger. Process says that irrespective of whether anyone is pushing you to do it or not, you do it. You learn because learning is its own goal. You learn because your own security is your own goal. You learn also because you say that excellence is its own reward. And then each outcome does not push your self-esteem up and down. So the question is this: if you are focusing on the process and ability, your reaction to outcomes is like this. If you are focusing only on outcomes and you're hollow inside, that's the largest problem. Okay, interviews. Unfortunately, I hate to do this, but everybody is bothered about interviews and jobs and internships and placements. Okay, what is selling? Give me a definition of selling. Give me a definition of selling. Yeah.
Helping your consumers solve an issue.
Okay, good answer. Helping your consumers solve an issue. So I have my own definition of selling.
I give you something, you give me money for it.
That's trading. Okay, I give you something, you give me money for it. That's trading. So selling to me is transfer of conviction.
Making the other person realize that they need what.
Okay, so I am convinced about something, I have to convince you. Okay, an interview is a selling situation. Agreed? So most fundamental thing, you cannot sell anything to anybody unless you first sell it to yourself. So if you walk into an interview without believing you need the job, thinking about how I will do relative to other people, you'll never get it. Only process is in your control. But process is a much deeper word. Process is not a sequence of steps. Process says, how do I get better? All the time. I benchmark internally, I benchmark externally, I read, I look at everything that I can do to discover and improve on myself. That's what process is. Okay, I'm going to go quickly. I'm assuming that we've covered this. Comparison and competition are deep in the psyche, implicit assumption, zero-sum game, relative grading system. So we are all responsible. Organizations are responsible, educational institutes are responsible. The companies which shortlist on CGPA are responsible. The perception of talent as a predictor of outcomes and the discovery of Uber. So every time now when you do comparison, and if it's a zero sum game, every time somebody says something and they're very articulate, oh my God, this person is more articulate than me, one more, right? So everything builds. Grass is greener on the other side, everybody seems to be happier, everybody seems to have a cooler life, etc., etc. High social media intensifies FOMO and vice versa. FOMO plus lack of validation gives greater FOMO gives greater activity. So you have to convert vicious to virtuous. Potential consequences, I went through this, right? Okay. I went through this, I went through this, I went through this. So basically look what I want to do, this is for your drawing question. Drawing on the right side of the brain, Betty Edwards, she claims she can teach anybody to draw in 5 days. These are drawings of novices, this was the first drawing and they're drawing 5 days later after they took the course. And the way she does it is she says for instance, if you draw a face badly, she says just draw the face upside down. Because when you draw the face directly, you are drawing as per your conception of the face and your conception of a nose, and if that conception is bad, but you just turn that face upside down, you're just copying the shapes. So most of it, now you realize that by turning the face upside down, you can draw reasonably well. Now your self-perception has changed, and that's kind of how it moves. Do a personal strengths weakness analysis, do it early, keep refining. Identify 2 strengths you want to take to excellence, identify 1 weakness you want to overcome, identify 1 non-work passion you want to keep alive. Now if at all you want to experiment, for 1 you experiment with 2 or you experiment with 3, don't kind of do more than that. Projects at work. So when you are taking on a new project, why do you want to do this? It fits with your development goals, others are doing it, it could build your CV. Reason 1 and reason 3 are acceptable, reason 2 are not. So it has to be 1 and 3, not 2. If anything is only 2, please do not do it. This is a very, very simple checklist for accepting anything that you want to do. This is my larger piece. And I know that summer internships come up with in 2 months or slightly more than that, that makes it difficult. You cannot sell a product you are not convinced about. So strengthen the product, the positioning will follow. Don't start working on positioning before you have built the product. Look at what you believe in about yourself that is true, strengthen that, build that, that's the way to do it. Growth mindset, success and failure are labels, view all outcomes as feedback. There is an entire institute there to help you and mentor you, and we will assign you corporate mentors also. You are unique, celebrate your uniqueness. That's your best chance, not trying to do what everybody else is doing. Set a sleep target and adhere to it. Watch Matthew Walker's TED Talk, it's scary, it's a scary TED Talk on sleep. Experiment to discover new strengths but in a focused way. You are not alone, ask for help, cultivate mentors. This one we'll talk about at the end of 2 years, never leave a job for money alone. Okay, okay, unfortunately that doesn't work, so I will have to do it this way. I want everybody to take out a pen and paper.
Hi, I've got a question for you. How many people here would say they can draw? Well, I think we've got about 1 or 2% of the hands going up. And it's interesting, isn't it? It's a little bit like people think of spelling or singing. They think, well, you can either do it or you can't. But I think you can. Because when people say they can't draw, I think it's more to do with beliefs rather than talent and ability. So I think when you say you can't draw, that's just an illusion. And today I'd like to prove that to you. Now when I say draw, I'm not saying we're all going to draw like Michelangelo. We're not going to be painting the Sistine Chapel ceiling. But would you be happy if, by the end of this session, you could draw pictures a little bit like this? Or even a little bit like this? Well, actually, there's only 2 things you need to do to be able to achieve this. 1 is have an open mind. Are you up for that? Yes. And 2, just be prepared to have a go. So grab a pen and a piece of paper. Okay, so here's how it's going to work. I'll show you the first cartoon we're going to do, so just watch to begin with. Here we go. just watching. That's going to be our first cartoon. It's a character called Spike. So I'd like you to draw along with me. So I'll draw the first line, you draw, and when you've done that, look up, and I know you're ready for the next line. Okay, here we go. Start with the nose. Now, the eyes, they're like 66s or speech marks. That's it. Next, the mouth. Nice big smile. Now, over here, the ear. Next, some spiky hair. Next, put the pen to the left of the mouth. Little line like that. Pen under the ear. Drop a line like that. Pen to the left of the neck, top of the t-shirt. Line to the left, line to the right. Just hold your drawings up and show everyone. How are we all doing? Okay. Okay, fantastic. So, it looks like you've just learned to draw one cartoon, but you've actually learned more than that. You've learned a sequence that would enable you to draw hundreds and thousands of different cartoons, because we're just going to do little variations on that sequence. Have a go at this. Draw along with me. Nose. Eyes. Smile. That's it. Now some hair. Pen to the left of the mouth. Under the hair. Little V shape for the top. Line to the left. Line to the right. So we've got another character. Let's call her Thelma. So we've got Spike and Thelma. Let's try another one. Here we go. Another little variation, getting the idea. Starting with the nose. But this time we'll change the eyes slightly. Look, two circles together like that. That's it. Then, two little dots in for the eyes. And this time we'll change the mouth slightly. Watch. Little circle coloured in there. Have a go at that. Next, the ear. Now we'll have some fun with the hair, watch. Some nice curly hair. Then same thing, pen to the left of the mouth, little line like that. Under the ear, drop a line. Top of the t-shirt, line to the left, line to the right. I think we'll call him Jeff. We'll do one more. One more go. Here we go. You're getting the idea. So we'll start with a nose again. Notice we're doing little variations. Now we'll change the eyes so we've got them apart, and we'll put some little dots in like that. Next, the mouth's slightly different. Let's put a little V shape like that. Triangle. And a little line across, and we'll just colour this little bit in. Now watch this bit carefully. Some hair. Watch. Here we go. A little line like that. Next, a bit more there. And watch. A couple of triangles to make a little bow. Triangle at the bottom. Rest of the hair. Pen to the left of the mouth again. You get the idea. Drop a line for the neck. Another V shape. Line to the left. Line to the right. There we go. Let's call her Pam. So you've done 4 cartoons. You can have a little rest now. Take a rest. You're getting the idea. All we're doing is little variations. We could go on, I'll just demonstrate a couple to you. We could go on all day, couldn't we? You could do someone looking unhappy, a bit like that. Or you could experiment with perhaps someone who's, just draw a straight line. Someone looking a bit fed up. Or perhaps you could do anything you like, really. Just try things out. Look at this. Little squiggle. There we are. So all sorts of things we can do. Actually, one more I'll let you do. One more idea. This is a great little technique. Have a go at this. People with glasses on. Just draw a nose a bit like spikes. Next, draw some frames. So 2 circles like that with a little bit in between. Now, just put some dots inside for the eyes like that. Next, the ear. So it's a little bit like we did before. But this time, we'll join up the frames. That's it. Watch this bit. And this bit I really like. Watch. And then, a little bit there. Pencil under the moustache, line down. Top of the shirt, left and right. So there we have it. We could carry on, couldn't we? Hopefully we've done enough to convince you that, in fact, we can all draw. And not just people here. I've worked with, I'm going to give you 3 examples of other people who've learned to draw, and it actually surprised them too. And I'm going to save what I think is my favourite, most surprising example until last. The first example is I've worked a lot with children and students in schools. And actually, the little ones, they just draw fine. But when they get to about 15 or 16, most of them think they can't draw. But I've worked with them. I worked this week in a school where I was coaching them on using pictures for memory. And a girl was trying to remember what red blood cells do. And she drew this little picture of a red blood cell carrying a handbag with O2 on it to remind her that the red blood cells carry oxygen to all parts of the body. That was a great one. The other people I've worked with is many adults in all walks of life, and particularly in business, and they often will want to make presentations memorable. So again, a quick cartoon or a sketch could be really good for that. And again, most people think they can't draw, but take this example. A couple of wavy lines. Little boat. Could be a metaphor to represent we're all in this together. So that, if that was just drawn in a presentation, would really stay in the memory, wouldn't it? Yeah. But the third example is, you shouldn't have favourites really, should you? This is my favourite. Have you ever been at a party when someone asks you what you do? I get a bit sceptical when people ask me that. And this lady said to me, I said, I do a bit of training and I teach people to draw. And she said, would you come along and do some for our group? She said, I work with some people. She was a volunteer, a group of people who've suffered strokes. So I said, I'm sure I could, spare some time for that. So I said I would, and I booked a time in. Have you ever done that? And you get nearer the time and you think, what have I let myself in for here? Will I be able to do it? I thought, what could I do with them, you see? So I know, I'll do my cartoon drawing. They'll like that. But then as I got nearer the time, I got more and more apprehensive, because then I was thinking, I've worked with children, I've worked with all sorts of adults. I've never worked with a group like this. And it turns out it was all part of a charity called Talk. And this Talk charity is a wonderful charity that helps people who've suffered strokes but have a particular condition known as aphasia. You might have heard of aphasia, sometimes called dysphasia. And the key thing is, it affects their ability to communicate. So, for example, they might have trouble reading, writing, speaking, or understanding. And it can be quite an isolating condition. It can be very, very frustrating and can lead to a loss of confidence. Anyway, so I prepared all this stuff, went to do this session for a couple of hours, tea break in the middle, and I got more apprehensive. But actually, I needn't have worried, because I'm going to show you now the work that they did. And it was one of the best things I've ever done. I'm going to show you the first slide. And I taught them spike, just like I did for you. And I want you to see the reaction on their faces when they did this. What you can see here are two of the stroke recoverers on the left and right, and one of the volunteer helpers in the centre. And each stroke recoverer, there are about 36 in the room with volunteers as well. There's one-to-one helpers. And you can just see the delight on their faces, can't you? Let's look at another picture. This is a gentleman called David. And he's holding up his picture, and you can tell it was the picture of Spike, can't you? In fact, I think he's drawn Spike even better there. But what I didn't realise until even after the session was that a number of the people in this session, including David, were drawing with their wrong hand. David's stroke meant that it affected the right side of his body, and he drew with his left hand, as many did. Nobody mentioned it to me. Nobody complained. They just got on with it. And it was an inspirational session for me. It was quite a humbling session, one of the best things I felt I've ever done. And at the end of it, I had a lovely email from Dr. Mike Jordan, and he's the chair of the talk group, happens to be a medical doctor, he's the chair of the group. And he wrote to me, and I'm quoting, he said, "Our recoverers learned today that they can draw." He said, but more than that, this sort of activity really builds their confidence. So I was happy, he was happy, everyone was happy. They've invited me back again, and I go in there now about every 3 or 4 months. So it's great. So I thought that was a lovely example to share. Fancy one more drawing? Yes. Here we go. Grab your pens. Here we go. Right, I'm going to get you to draw someone that you would recognise. So, start with a big nose, a bit like Spike's. Next, we'll do some eyes. And you might be thinking, this is also a bit like Spike. Watch the next bit. You're getting warm? There you go. Little line down there. Down here. Little V shape. Line to the left, line to the right. Then you've got Albert Einstein. So, you've got the pens with you. You've proved that you can draw. You're very welcome to take the pens with you and have a practice at home, even show somebody else. But actually, I'd like to leave you with a final thought. When you walked in here today, many of you didn't believe you could draw. And, you know, I've got a question for you about that. How many other beliefs and limiting thoughts do we all carry around with us every day? Beliefs that we could perhaps potentially challenge and think differently about. And if we did challenge those beliefs and think differently about them, apart from drawing, what else would be possible for us all? Thank you very much.
What is the takeaway? So, with some training and with some direction, we can become reasonably good at anything. Larger point, the biggest barriers to what we can achieve are still in our own head. And let me reiterate that final message, the highest form of competition is competition with the self. Thank you very much. See you.